Waiters waitresses of Reddit, what's the most awkward first date you had to witness firsthand? Not a first date, but we did have a guy come into our steakhouse on a Saturday night at 7 PM with no reservation. He then told us on the spot he was going to propose to his girlfriend. We had to seat them somewhere awful. It was right next to the bathroom, and when he got down on one knee, looking around nervously, absolutely no one noticed. Him and his GF kept waiting for the rest of the restaurant to see them and go quiet or even clap for them, but not a single person noticed. She said yes, looked disappointed, and they went back to dinner like nothing happened. They must not have minded too much because they came back for their 1-year anniversary. This time he made a reservation, lol. Just saw one on Valentine's Day. The date seemed to be going very well. Actually, not awkward at all. They talked non-stop. No lulls in conversation. They were laughing, carrying on, and just generally having a good time. In fact, another server and I were laughing about how obnoxiously loud they were. And I heard the gentleman say, "And obviously you're not still married, right? Please tell me you're not still married." She said, "Well, actually." And then things got very uncomfortable. It must not have been a deal breaker because they stayed at the restaurant another hour until we closed. But they were very quiet for the rest of the night. Hardly spoke to each other at all. A teenage couple sharing an ice cream and holding hands very awkwardly. After they finished the ice cream, they kept talking about their very adventurous sexual fantasies. They were around 14 years old. Super awkward to have to interrupt them to ask if they want anything else. My sexual fantasy when I was 14 was holding hands. I had these two people that were there on a first date. After the appetizers, this poor man got the S and was going back and forth to the bathroom all night. There was only a few other people in the restaurant at the time, so it was noticeable, and they were chuckling every time he got up. I honestly felt so bad for the guy. Didn't happen to me, but I was working while the bartender got to experience it. Guy and girl came in. Super weird chemistry all night. The guy is obviously trying to impress her by being a huge douche, and she looks like she's just pretending to not hate it so the date will end faster. At the end of the night, she says she'll take an Uber home, and he awkwardly leaves without her. She then waits for the bartender to come back over, orders another cocktail, and asks for his phone number. I legit saw the guy try to roofie the girl. Like, not even trying to be hidden about it. He did it right in front of me. The girl went to the bathroom and I was cleaning the table next to them. I saw him take the powder out and slip it inside the drink. Another thing too. It was a pizza place. Who tries to roofie someone in a pizza place? Edit. Yes, I called the cops. At the end of the dinner, two couples on a double date dine and dash. I chased them down. And the girls had no clue. Their dates had told them they already paid. The girls ended paying. The guys had no cash. I worked at a restaurant in high school, along with a number of classmates. A group of 4 people that we all knew came in to eat and left without paying. We just gave the manager their home phone numbers so she could speak with their parents. I used to work at a sushi restaurant in Anchorage. And there was a girl who would come about once every few weeks with a different guy. Every single time. She ordered a hirabap, which is like a rice salad sashimi bowl. And it was giant. I've only ever seen a handful of people ever finish the entire thing in one sitting. She would finish the whole thing with chopsticks and always ask for a spoon towards the end. It was always fun watching the guys look stunned when she finished. One day she came with this dude that ordered what she did. And when they both finished the bowl, they ordered another and split it. Wish they had ended up together, but she came back with a different guy a couple weeks later. Edit. She never paid, lol. Edit. More common pronunciations are would up bap, hod up bap, and hodio up bap. Not a first date. But when I first started bartending, I had a woman who was very obviously stood up. She got there, ordered a drink, and would look around every once in a while. I saw her use her phone a couple times and her mood just got sadder until she finally put her phone upside down on the bar and ordered food an hour later. I wiped what I could off her bill, then paid the rest myself. Told her it was on the house. In my career it's happened 2 more times. Once with another woman and once with a guy. I did the same thing. Nothing sucks more than eating alone and defeated. Edit. Thank you for the upvotes and nice comments. Made my night. Close bracket. Edit 2. Seriously guys. You're so sweet. NGL today was kind of rough. But everyone has brightened it so much. I really appreciate it. At a restaurant I worked at, there was a white guy and a black guy on a first date. They were sitting in a booth and having a good time. White guy gets up to go to the bathroom. When he came back he sat in the wrong booth with a different black guy. Took him a minute to realize it was a different person. The person he was on a date with was not happy at all. They tried to salvage the date, but it didn't work. The guy's card declines. I didn't want to embarrass him, so I waved him over near the credit card machine so it would look like he needed to go to the bathroom. He told me to try it again and I assumed he was going to move money over on his app. He went back to his date. Card declines again. The machine prints a receipt that states the reason for decline. Insufficient funds. I keep trying 4 more times. I go over to the table and say I'm having an issue with the card. Might be our machine. Do you have another? I walk away with the new card. And it declines. I wave him over. He gets up angrily and I'm guessing now the date has caught on. He proceeds to berate me saying that it must be our machines because he knows he has money. He starts making fun of me, questioning if I know what I'm doing. He is doing this in front of his date, I'm guessing to save face. Gives me another card. Declined. The date pays. I worked at a bar where like 50% of our business was from Tinder dates. This one time, 2 guys came in separately and sat at different tables by themselves. Along the same wall. They were both facing the door and clearly waiting for dates. Eventually a woman comes in. Walks up to the closest guy. Sits down and they start chatting. They start ordering drinks. After 5 minutes, the other guy, who is still waiting by himself, gets up and walks over to the couple. He says Asahi to the girl and is like, Asam, aren't you so and so? Dot. I'm so and so, we were supposed to be meeting? She was clearly flustered. Lots of awkward laughter. And she gets up and goes with the other guy to the other table. Couple minutes later the other woman shows up and sits with first guy and he tells her all about it. Lady comes in to get a table, says she's expecting a man and gives us a brief description. He shows up about 10 minutes later and she starts saying she knew it. He looks very surprised and scared. I took a drink order and when I get back they are gone. The hostess fills me in that in my absence they had a heated but civil exchange. The man was married to the lady's cousin, also the lady was married. Apparently they had been texting for a while after meeting via Craigslist personals. I'm assuming the married but looking section. Don't know if they hooked up in the end or just called the whole thing off. Did they order pina coladas? Not a first date. But very awkward. Guy comes in with an escort and drops a good amount of money on booze at the bar. Then she leaves a few hours later. And he informs us that his wife is on her way to meet him for dinner and tips us an extra $200 to keep our mouths shut. Keeping it classy. We had a regular that would have drinks and appetizers with his girlfriend. The guy starts talking about how nice it is in the modern day that you can just date without labels. Woman. In suspiciously chipper voice responds that sometimes labels are really helpful in defining the boundaries of the relationship. Man. Very upbeat replies that sometimes it's nice just to enjoy your time with someone without having to define anything. It was so hard to listen to. But mad respect to both of them for making their intentions known up front. And in such an amicable way. How'd the date end? The date I saw started off great. Full stop. I was playing in a band at a small club. There were about 30 people in the club. A couple who had been sitting close together in a corner booth disappeared together into one of the bathrooms. In between songs. When it was quiet in the club, the bartender yells, "They better not be in there eyeing on my sink." The whole place turns and stares at the bathroom door. And as we're staring, the couple emerges. Smiling at first. Then they look around. See everybody staring at them. And their faces turn a deep color of shame. They quickly pay their bill and left. Not a waitress. But my daughter and I were having dinner at a restaurant and the table next to us was a mom, dad, and 2 daughters. Maybe 10 and 12. The parents took them out to dinner to tell them they were getting a divorce. Ultimate dad joke would be to tell the waiter to split the bill lol. Not a first date, but a last date. We had a guy who would bring his secretary in for lunch 3 times a week. Our per person average at lunch was $125. Everyone knew he was married because he'd bring his wife and kids to dinner 3 times a week, at $200 per person average. Often on the same day. Well, one day he realized he needed to dump his secretary. He did it at our restaurant. We all watched it happen too because she started crying so hard. And they were center of attention for everyone to see. To make things weirder, he did it early in the meal and he drove her there. So she came and hung out with the employees until his lunch was over. Acting like everything was totally fine even though her tears were welling up with every word. He was back in the restaurant with her within a week. Then we never saw them again. Never again with the wife and kids either. Always wondered if he got caught in the end. Not a first date but a guy decided to propose to a stripper from Scores, high-end joint in Nick. She was stunning. Also in fine dining. He gets on one knee and pops the question and she goes out loud, "Are you kidding me?" He got up and asked for the check. Edit. Can't spell. I once was sitting at a nice cafe with my then girlfriend when one guy proposed to this girl. She didn't say anything. She just started crying. At first people thought she cried because she was happy. That thought disappeared pretty quickly when she started full on bawling and walking away. Saw a guy hitting on a girl and buying her drinks for the entire night. Then realizing she was a hooker. In short, he got there early and let me know it was a first date, which was a lunch date. When she got there they started chatting and he ordered a drink and she ordered a water. After a few minutes he skipped on appetizers and every so often I would go by to see if they would like to order. She would open her mouth to speak and he would interrupt with something like they were fine at the moment. Well, this went on for a while. I even tried to just take hers but he would insist they were okay for now. So he kept ordering drinks and she kept sipping water. After an hour or so she said she had to go and just left. He asked me if he did something wrong. I answered honestly with since it was a lunch date she probably didn't have too much for breakfast and if you offer a lunch date she's probably expecting to eat and you wouldn't allow her to order. She's probably starving. He sat there and drank till the end of my shift. I worked as a barista at a coffee shop with a dishwashing sink that brought you face to face with whoever was sitting at the coffee bar across from you. For some reason, so many people chose this spot for their first dates. So I would have to wash dishes and pretend I wasn't literally on the date with them. One time a person I knew was on their first date with someone and chose that cursed seat across for the dishwashing sink. Because we knew each other. We chatted a little bit and then as if a partition raised between us. They began their date. But I still had dishes to do. So uncomfortable. There was a guy who would use the place I worked at as his go-to. Every time it's a different girl and every time it ends with angry. He'd butter them up and brag about himself and talks about how he is such a gentleman for treating them to classy place. And as gratitude they should let him them. Every time the date walks away and we have to deal with a horny asshole who tries to get either Pitty's ex or Pitty dessert from the female staff. At my place we had the opposite. A young in shape really handsome dude from Spain would be in 3-4 times a week with a new older woman. The women would be buying him everything and basically swooning over him. He'd always walk up to pay with a little smirk while she would be paying for everything. He did this for years. A middle-aged couple. Man. 30 minutes monologue about the cars he likes. How fast they are. What the challenges are in maintenance. He was literally going on non-stop every time I pass them. Me. Arrives with food which made him shut up for like 10 seconds. Woman. Taking the sudden silence as her chance to get a word in. Woman. Well. I really like butterflies. Awkward silence. Guy. Continues his car talk until dessert. Curiously enough, they came back 2 more times over the summer. I was the one on the first date. Went to a bar with this guy. Our waitress came up and immediately recognized him. Was super friendly. Took our orders and left. While she was gone, he told me they used to date. The rest of the night they openly flirted with each other. There was no second date. Edit. Thanks for the award, kind stranger. Edit 2. Whoa. This is the most awards I've received. Thank you all. Wasn't the waiter just a nearby patron with good hearing? They were just about done with dinner when she gets a call, tells the caller she isn't busy and makes plans to spend the night with another guy, all while lover boy sat across from her with his jaw on the floor. At the end of the Mellis, after appetizers, 2 of the most expensive entrees, a high-priced bottle of wine, and dessert with a bottle of Domus, the man says to me, in front of his date, "Hey Manus, we are on a first date. What more can I do to guarantee I get laid tonight?" The young lady turned deep red with her jaw dropped open. I sat down the bill and said, "After asking me that? There is nothing you can do." In a cafe I worked at a few years ago, a lady who was a regular came in outside of her usual tea time. Few minutes later a dude came in and they introduced themselves. He had coffee. She had tea. Her tea had 12 sugars in it. I was bartending this New Year's Eve. Upscale casual cocktail martini joint. Couple sits down. Guy gets a little sloshed. Goes to the bathroom and comes out with his ex's Instagram up asking his date if she thought he was hotter than the ex's new boyfriend. Girl tried to give him an out but he kept doubling down, saying things like, "Well, I think you're hotter than her, so why can't you say it to me?" She was outside at 2 AM in Tez waiting for her mom to come pick her up. Restaurant in Canada. Couple coming from USA. Man has a first Jenny phone and they haven't been released in Canada yet. Guy at next table is so enthralled with the device he won't stop talking to the iPhone man. Talks so much that his date got up without saying anything and walked out the door. Was a server for about a decade. One of my old co-workers would bring all his first dates to the fancy restaurant we worked at BC. He would always get his meals discounted as per the employee handbook. This started getting tricky when he started dating one of the other servers. Watching her serve a handful of his first dates over the first few weeks of their relationship was always an interesting time. I waited on a couple who were clearly on a first date, and the lady was clearly not impressed by the guy she was on the date with. The date was over quick enough and the guy paid, leaving me a 5% tip. The next day, the lady came into the restaurant, walked up to me, said that was the worst first date I've ever been on, and I was mortified when he stiffed you on the tip and then handed me $20. Tequila bar. She was pretty loud. Not that it was necessary, given how close they were. After some get to know you chit chat, he apparently says something that she doesn't quite agree with. No big deal. Right? Nope. Huh? Okay. I think we should probably just start this over. Like, actually reset the date. Him. What are you? Huh? Gets up. Takes 3 steps to the door. Turns around. And comes back to their seat with an outstretched hand. Hi. I'm, name. Him. You've got to be kidding me. Seriously? Huh? I'm so glad we could try this place out. Great to see you. Him. Dot. Okay? Just sit down. And then I tried my hardest not to die of second-hand embarrassment. It was an awkward move. At best. But clearly not what this guy was willing to play along with. I went over to drop the check and the girl had gone to the restroom. Guy looks at me and says my date isn't going as well as I'd hoped. Would you be free to hang out later? Now that I think about it, waiters and waitresses are the ones at Aussie experience most awkward dates. We had a regular who would always sit in one particular waitress's section every time he came in. He was always by himself. And he would flirt with her constantly. She was fine with it because he was pretty harmless. Always came at lunch. Tipped well. One day he came in at dinner time with a girl. And they were both dressed up. Pretty clearly a date. He still sat in that waitress's section. It kinda seemed like maybe he was trying to show off. Or make her jealous. They even bought their own bottle of wine. Well, at some point the date ditched him. That became clear. And then he decided to drink the bottle of wine himself. The bar served him one more drink because they didn't see how effed he was and then had to cut him off when he fell twice. And then he started sobbing to the waitress about how lonely he was. We ended up calling a cab for him. It was quite sad. And we haven't seen him since. I hope you found love, man. And there's no shame. Feel free to come back anytime. Sat behind a Tinder date in process once at a nice pizza place. The girl spent the entire date talking about her crazy Tinder dates and how often she ate on the first date but how the guys were all nuts and she really hates Tinder but is giving it another try. Read. She was bat insane. She did about 95% of the talking that night. And I could feel how uncomfortable the guy was without even being able to see him. My favorite question. It was mostly awkward because the woman was unbelievably demanding and rude. But only when her date wasn't around. I came back with their food and offered a completely over-the-top apology with a tearful garnish. The guy looked at her with horror and asked her what the happened, then left. I sadly put a waiter through the awkwardness. I mean, it was kinda hilarious. I went on a date with another dude. Except I didn't know it was a date. The entire thing was funny. I just thought he wanted to get wings and beers after our basketball game. Anyways. The thing is, the waiter came over right at the point where we started joking about it and heard some weird negotiation like him saying, "You won't suck my dick even if I pay for your meal?" And me replying, in jest, "Well, maybe. If I can order the steak." When asked how to do the check, the guy fake stretched. Why do that? Not me. My friend. There was this young couple. Said they were around 15-16. The guy was going for a kiss with a full duck face, closed eyes and everything. The girl looked disgusted and terrified in the same time. The best visual is the scene in X-Men where Quicksilver was saving everybody's asses and found that couple on the roof. I worked for a while as a waitress at a small town restaurant. I hesitate to call it a date, but I witnessed a great encounter. A grown man, probably late 30s, comes into the restaurant and tells us what table he wants and that he is there for a date. Describes what his date will be wearing and goes to sit down. Date gets there and isn't as described. It's another grown man, though he is wearing the bracelet that the first man described. I go to direct him to the table. We get almost there when first guy sees us and stands up. He has a weird look I wouldn't really call surprise, but not sure what else it could have been. They make eye contact and almost in unison they each say a variant of "You're actually a guy?" Well, they had dinner anyway and chatted me up the whole time. Turns out both of them were pretending to be lesbians and Yahoo Messenger hoping to get some hot young girls to go out with them. Not sure how they thought it would work once they met in person though. A rare double catfish. Oh, I finally have a story that relates. It was actually my first shift serving. And one of the tables was obviously a first date. I could tell just by the general awkwardness between them and the lack of any real genuine conversation. It was towards the end of my shift. So I was doing my checkout, basically counting my cash and entering in credit card tips, and they walked up to me for what I assumed was just a friendly thank you. The girl handed me a napkin with her phone number and said, "You seem cool." The guy was standing right behind her. He then scoffed and then said, "You bitch. You can get an Uber home," and walked out the door. It being my first shift, I hadn't really encountered anyone leaving a number for me yet, so I had absolutely no idea what to do, so I awkwardly said thanks and walked into the kitchen of the restaurant to shield myself from the insanely awkward situation that had just unfolded.